James is going to talk about that in the Bible. So go ahead, James.
Okay, folks, get ready. So I'm just going to mention, I don't know how this is pronounced in Afrikaans. It could be the Bible, it could be the Bible, it could be the Bible, whatever. I'm not intending to make fun of the language or anything like that. I'm making fun of how little I really know about Afrikaans. There's no way I could speak it. And Naslan, I don't even know what that means. Na would mean after. The equivalent in German is probably N-A-C-H. I suspect it's something like, it's not so much commented on, but there are notes, so that might be notated or something like that. So where there are, it looks as though where there are parallel passages, let's put in the middle column, which is substantially smaller than the columns to the right and the left. But this is a classic. I mean, Pauline knew what it was, you know, like when I pulled it out like this, she knew it was a Bible. It's just a classic Bible. This is put out by the South African, or was put out by the South African Bible Society. Bibelgenootschap. They probably say G like the Dutch do, like a German, something like a German CH. Erste Uitgabe, 1933, the year Hitler was semi-elected. He only got maybe a third of the vote. He became ruler of Germany. Second, 1953, 20 years later. And third was 1954. It's a different format, it says. I don't know what SAC format means. And the fourth, Uitgabe, was put out in 1957. So I was 3 years old when it was put out. This is would be a much later printing than 1957. It's held up quite well. I suspect it dates to about, so I got it from a Christian supply thing in town, and I think it was in the 80s I got hold of it. So it could be, maybe like 40 years old or something like that. And it's quite good from what I can tell. The printing is a couple of places where some of the letters have got a little bit clipped off, but that's expected. My worst that I've got is my translation of Mein Kampf. It looks as though it was done really fly by night. Maybe someone actually believed in Nazism, I'm not sure. But yeah, that one, the person who owned it before really is either very bad, very, very bad binding, or they've gone through it many, many times and broken down the spine of it. So I'm hoping it was just bad binding. Anyway, this is to mark I was telling myself my birthday was a couple of days back on Tuesday. It was my 70th birthday. I was wanting as a present to myself to finish up the New Testament in Afrikaans, and I haven't taken any courses in Afrikaans. I've taken some courses in German. It's 3.5 layers. Why the half layer? Well, I came down. I was in the last stage of cancer, even when I bone marrow cancer, even when I started the course. So I made it about halfway through that course. I was by far the best student in that course. I've got way more than 4 course equivalent, at least in terms of reading German. And then I've taught myself what little of Dutch I know, which is actually quite a bit, by reading Agatha Christie novels, all murder mysteries, weirdly enough. A few short stories. And then in the Dutch and in the English. And when I go through something that way, I'll go through, including writing out every word in translation. I'll go through it it's at least 4 times in the Dutch or whatever the target language is, and then I'll go through it once in the English, just checking back and forth to make sure I've accounted for every word. So it saves a lot in terms of looking up stuff in dictionaries. I love dictionaries, and not just in foreign languages, but in English. But it really is slow going, here's the word, do, and then so on and so forth. It might be a little faster if you've got an internet kind of like dictionary or something like that, but I don't think it'd be much faster. All I can tell you is when I was taking, well, the last course in German that I took, the half course and the course before, there was one woman who'd been raised in German, but she was back trying to relearn it. And we'd be in the labs, and we'd have to do lab work, and we had a special dictionary that was part of the lab work that you look up on the internet on the computers, and the kids never bothered with that. It was always, James, can you help me with this vocabulary? James, and even she had to grit her teeth because she thought she was better at German, or somehow or another, at least teaching German, than the actual instructor. And the instructor had actually been to a flunky university called Oxford. I should have said cattle crossing, because that's basically what Oxford means. Wow, she was, now that's a particular form of arrogance. I've talked about it before. It's stunning. It's stunning. Pretentiousness. Yeah. The root or the key to pretentiousness is pretense, which is basically pretending you know more than you do, or you're more powerful than you are, or more talented than you actually are. So pretentious. She was stunningly pretentious. I'm not going to mention the name, but she had a riveting personality, and maybe you can figure that out. There's a little pun there. She was really riveting. Anyway, yeah, she was old enough to know better. I think she might have been older than me, and at that point in time I was about 56. Wow, stunning. She was misleading the kids into thinking that this teacher, I mean, her and her little acolyte, who was maybe 20 or something like that, in that class, were going along saying, the teacher doesn't understand that not all the students are caught up with you. Are you stupid? The first class I ever took with him, and he knows his stuff. I corrected him twice. This is in one particular class, not just a course. I corrected him. This was way back when, like almost 10 years earlier. He'd know that I knew way more than the students, but somehow or another he's near retirement age, like a year or two away from retirement. They thought for sure that I had, that he was kind of bamboozled by me and thought all the students were caught up. The previous class to that one, which most of the kids had taken. The woman had been very nice. The woman teaching it hadn't been this guy from Oxford. She's very nice. I told her, don't burn yourself out on making accommodations to the kids. There's such a thing as being too kind. And I was worried about her. I was worried about the kids. There was one guy who I kind of like befriended, or he befriended me or something like that. We had assignments. They were like weekly assignments. And she said you can hand them anytime. Well, like she talked with me about at the end of class, this is the last class, I believe. Do you know when so-and-so is going to be getting the assignments, plural, in? It would be like a dozen assignments.
Yeah.
Well, you can imagine what was happening in terms of marking.
Mark all of them at once, yeah.
So I was concerned about her, and I don't think she made it much more than a couple of years later, but I am telling you, the response of the kids in the next class, the professor told me, this is the guy who was running, he had a degree program, it's just him, and then this teaching assistant. She was German and a wonderful person, but he was managed to run a degree program where, they had people being sent over, I believe, to Magdeburg University. It's not the most prestigious university in the world. It's rated maybe top 400 or something like that, maybe a little bit lower than that, but what the hey? He was managing to get people out, get a bachelor's in German. And the thing is, I can just imagine. Here's some flunkies. I can remember the first midterm in the previous class. There was this one girl who, she was almost like a stranger. She was missing classes. You don't miss language classes. You don't miss math classes. You can miss other classes, but you cannot miss those classes and expect to keep up, because there's always new material. You've got to be absorbing it and then combining it with previous material. So after the first midterm, she turns me. She's in the front row. I got a B plus or something, and she was surprised. I was shocked. And anyone who knew anything about languages should have been just dropping their teeth on the floor, because yeah. And I don't know if she actually tried the next class, which would have been 2000, but it said in the calendar, get ready. This is protocol out at the university. You're doing 2000 level. No, it's 1500. So you do the first. No, it's 2000. When you get up to 2000, it's understood. It's 2000. It is immersion. It isn't for the first few layers, but it is for that layer. Whether it's 1500 or 2000, it is immersion. You're not supposed to have any. It's all supposed to be in the target language. Nothing in English. Nothing. The professor's not supposed to explain stuff to you in English. It's supposed to be kind of like, ear, there we go, mouth, so on and so forth. And, they were all up in arms about that. They thought he was a bad guy. But you check the protocol for Spanish or whatever out there, it was the same. Immersion at that level. Oh, man, it was just Bush League these. And what happened? What happened? The professor told me. He taught them not the previous layer, but many of them the layer before that. And all he said to me is he was surprised. He might have even said shocked to see that they'd made it through that intermediate layer. Okay, so what would have happened is eventually, the kids would have been complaining, and then they would have said, "What are they complaining about?" Oh. They're complaining about it being immersion. They're supposed to be ready for immersion. They're not ready for immersion. And who I was really trying to protect was this person that they thought was just wonderful, the teaching assistant. She was wonderful, but they were saying, she's better than the German. No, she was good for what she did, the lower levels, so long as the kids understood. Is that stopped? Is that finished?
No.
Okay. I just thought I heard a sound.
But you do need to get started on the Greek
Well,
world.
it doesn't. I'm covering whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
I haven't finished it up. But, yeah. So I finished the New Testament in this, and I've finished up maybe a third of the Old Testament. So I'm over half the way through that, just not using a dictionary or anything like that, just based on what I know of German and what I've taught myself in Dutch. And also what I know about linguistics and so on and so forth. Okay, so now we're looking at this. We're going to be looking at it a bit more because I've got more stuff to go through. We covered a little bit about, well, this is stunning. The Dark Age and Archaic Greece, okay? Dark Age, non-existent age. When you look at Egyptian chronology, the 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th and 26th dynasties, that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dynasties that are dated consecutively according to the Egyptian king list. It survives in, I think, at least 4 different versions, but they all disagree with each other. And there's this one period. They dated between 1200, they being Egyptologists, 1200 and 700 BC. And it's, understand, there are names from all of those dynasties, 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, all of them, 7 of them, in the report of Ashurbanipal's campaign. I don't know if he was there in person, but the Assyrian campaign into Egypt in 667, 666 BC. Names from all of those dynasties. How can that happen? Because some of those dynasties are supposed to be more than 500 years before. Including a Ramses The last Ramses was supposed to be 1150 BC, and here's a Ramses poking his head up. Now, it's been misread by the Assyriologists. These things happen. That's okay. They got the first two syllables right, the last syllable, you know, they got the right symbol and all that sort of stuff. But it just means sun. So the name is Lamentu. Why did they put an L there? Because it'd be R in the original for the pun. It's Ramentu. But two should be read Shashi, and it could also be read Sasi. So it's Laman Sasi, Raman Sasi. Why did they put an N in there for the pun? What does it mean? What does Ramses mean? It means, or Ramesse, in the original. Ramses is a not too bad Greek rendering of the Egyptian pharaoh's name, Ramesse. And what does it mean? Oh, it means offspring of the sun god, Re, or Ra, Ramesse. See how that is? Ra, Messe, Ra, sun god, offspring. Well, what does it mean in Assyrian? Laman Shashi. It means evil of the sun god. I know I nailed it because it's a pun. There are all sorts of possibilities given the symbols in the original Assyrian. But I nailed it because it's a pun. Okay? Anyway, there they are, 667, 666 BC. Unfortunately, Mycenaean Greece is dated according to the Egyptian so-called dating system. It's a misdating system, right? And you know, it's like bad dating. You know, it's like dating creeps or something like that. Bad dating. Sorry about the bad, but anyway, Dark Age and Archaic Greece. So this stuff doesn't exist. It's just a Dark Age and Empty Age, really. Okay, it's an empty set. What you've got is the Mycenaean stuff. It's been dated here, and well, from your point of view over here, and then on the timeline, and then you've got classical Greece, and then they've got this Dark Age, Dark Ages, or a Dark Age and Archaic Greece in here. It doesn't exist. This stuff just gets moved forward. Why? Who am I to say? Well, I don't say. It's carbon-14 or radiocarbon datings. Okay? Radiocarbon datings on King Tut's tomb are 850 BC, 890 BC. In order to please the Egyptologists, what radiocarbon experts do, and they've been doing it since I gathered the mid-50s, so they've been doing it for 70 years. They started doing it roughly when I was born. And this is for carbon-14 readings around the world. All around the world, they do what is called calibration. Watch out for those weasel words. It's a weasel word. Right? It's a weasel word. It's just adding numbers to the raw readings. Don't believe any carbon-14 reading that you run across, because there's, you know, it's definitely not an accurate year-by-year kind of accounting, but calibration, it's an absolute calibration, okay? Or not okay, I don't really care. I don't care what an Egyptologist says. You are on the losing side of history. You think you're on the winning side, but you're not. You cannot fight science. You have been for 70 years, and you can't. Okay? So this stuff just doesn't exist. Okay? The Dark Age is prehistory. There is history before then, and there's history after. But there's no cities. No prehistory. No. The period before any written records. There were written records before then. Okay. Life was pretty miserable. Well, there was no life. We don't know what caused this sad state of affairs. It's really sad. It's just a breakdown in intellectual ability amongst the Egyptologists. Whether it was the arrival of intruders from the outside or whether it collapsed from within. No, it was nothing of the sort. You know, they have Greek civilization collapsing. You know, what really happened is just after the Trojan War, they won the Trojan War. You know, they actually beat the Hittite Empire. You know, this would have been around 720, a little bit after that, 720 BC. Hittite Empire didn't last much longer. I mean, it just it would have been absolutely destroyed by the Assyrians. The Assyrians were past masters. They've been doing it for a long time. They'd go in, ruin a city, and ethnically cleanse the inhabitants. They did it all over the Middle East. You know, what ended Alalak? This is near, or Alalak, near near Aleppo. Aleppo existed back then. The Assyrians called it something like Halman, and that was their attempt at Aleppo. There we go. Welcome to the field of cuneiform studies. Okay? And wow. Yeah, they're the ones who destroyed it. They're going, oh, the Sea Peoples. No, the Sea Peoples didn't destroy it, you stupid idiots. The Sea Peoples did, this is the Greeks, make it all the way down to past Gaza. This is where the Assyrians had their showdown with them, but they were already knocking on the door of Egypt. And that's 712 BC. That's when the fight with the Sea Peoples happened. Okay? But the Greeks were kind of shunted off the mainland for a while, of at least the littoral of the Western Mediterranean. They're probably still messing around in what was called in ancient days Cilicia. The Assyrians called it Quay, Q-U-E, but there you go. So kind of like South Central Turkey. They were still there in force. And, you know, like you'll find names there in the Assyrian annals. Mopsus is supposed to have been something like a Greek seer. S-E-E-R. Like a prophet, right? And, then they found his name, Mopsus. It's Mukshush. Something like Mukshush. Oh, well, S's and SH's, those change pretty easily. But how do you get a P out of a K or vice versa? I don't know. So the Mukshush is written kind of like an alphabetic script, kind of like the script that was similar to what was used for Hebrew. It still is used for Hebrew. Okay? But I found that guy in the Assyrian annals, presumably 500 years, roughly 500 years after he's supposed to have existed. The name is Ushkiti. Well, that's not Mukshush, or much less Mopsus. Yeah, welcome to the world of Assyrian puns, okay? Now, it could be a name that was handed down from generation to generation for 500 years, but it wasn't. It's the same guy. Why? What does Ushkiti mean? Bad omen. What they're saying is, this guy's supposed to be a seer, he can't read the omens. See how that is? Probably not, but that's okay. Ushkiti, there are all sorts of examples where you've got a name that ends with, or starts with U, and there should be an M or a B put at the front of it. Maybe even a P, 5 times. Mushkiti. Oh, that's sounding a bit more like Mukshish. They didn't really care. All they wanted to do was get the pun out there. They weren't writing history. They were writing something like propaganda. Something like. There are a few differences. So there we go. You're the first people to hear that, actually, folks. I've mentioned to people about finding Burnaburiash, who was supposed to have died 500 years before, in the Assyrian annals for 858 BC. Yeah, captured by Shalmaneser III. Burnaburiash. They called him Burana Bully. Why would they put a double L there? Well, because you see, they were fighting what still is a marshy area, and I suspect, we don't know much about the details of the battle, I suspect guy got caught in some of the marshes, but it means ruin of the marsh. Burana Bully. Okay? And the ash on the end, it seems to be optional. Burnaburi. Burnaburiash. Okay? Burnaburia. Now, what other crazy things are in here? Well, we're going to deal a little bit with Greece, Rome, Byzantium, and Baghdad. But I'm going to deal with that later. I'm going to pull some sources out. Like many professors, have been bamboozled into thinking that the great civilization of the Middle Ages, outside of China, I suppose, was a Muslim civilization around 800 AD, best in the world. And I don't know, I could pull some examples up from the coeval Tang Dynasty, or Tang Dynasty, however you want to mispronounce it, in China, that would give the Abbasids located out of Baghdad for around 800. Give them good, not just a run for the money, but a good run for the money. But that civilization was based 800 AD. The majority of the people in the empire were not Muslims, and the leading cultural lights would have been Jews, Christians, in other words, Greek Christians, and other types of Christians too, Aramaic Christians, so on and so forth, and even Assyrian Christians, and Persians as well. The Persians had been somewhat civilized for about 1,000 years before that, even more than 1,000 years, and Greeks something like 1,400 years. 1,500 years before then, and the Jews, well, holy smokes, thousands of years before then. How much time?
4 minutes.
4 minutes. There we go.
Minutes.
So maybe we can deal with some of these issues. Greek characteristics, Greek race and ethnicity. Okay, so he says again and again, they didn't have nation states back then. Oh, read, please. Even in translation, I kind of try to read the Egyptian hieroglyphs, and I've kind of studied it, technically not at university, but with a university student, a university professor, and it was at the university, but not offered by the university. I want to make that clear. But read, and you read the annals. Just read the annals of the Egyptians. It's available. It was put up by a guy called, not Looking Bill, I've forgotten the name. It doesn't matter. It's over 100 years old, this translation, but it's the annals. It's missing some, but so you can get enough. Vile Asiatics, vile Cushites. These are people from the present-day Sudan, and they'd be black people. Vile. The vile sandfarers. Well, who are those? Well, they'd be people up on camels, and before then donkeys or whatever, maybe horses. Vile sandfarers. They're anyone outside the boundaries of Egypt. Egypt had a city, had a nation state. Okay, they were imperialists too, but they really believed in their own superiority. Get that straight, and it was one whole country. Now with Greece, you've got city-states. So what it was like was, on a small scale, what Europe was like during the so-called colonial era. It was really an imperial era, a misnomer, because there were very few colonies. Once, the colonial era, the colonialism in the New World had already happened or started. So it wasn't so much the Brits expanding in America or in Canada, it was the Americans and the Canadians. Get that straight. They weren't sending out settlers en masse. There were some, like in Uganda, I think it's Uganda, highlands of Uganda, in the country just south of where I was born, Rhodesia, and in South Africa. But understand, there was colonialism happening on two sides. There are three sides in the southern part of South Africa. What's that about? Well, I believe these reports. The reports coming from the Afrikaners was saying when they were coming up the east coast, not the west coast or the central area of South Africa, they ran into the Bantu coming south. Wow. Who does that land really belong to? See, what the world has done is kind of put the nail in the coffin for the wee little folk in South Africa. The Khoisan or Bushmen, whatever you don't or want to call them Hottentots. It looks as though the Germans wiped out